Hello and welcome to Choice and Control, a podcast celebrating the contribution that people with disabilities make to our communities. In this series, we are talking all things disability, social inclusion, and the National Disability Insurance Scheme. Throughout this series, you will also be hearing some great practical advice for making the most of your NDIS plan from local people accessing the scheme. This podcast series is brought to you by the team at Carers Queensland, NDIS Local Area Coordination Partner in the Community. I'm your host, Douglas Connor. Thank you for tuning in. On today's episode, I'm lucky enough to be chatting to Adam Shepherd and to Natasha Price, a dynamic duo from the Gold Coast who are joining me to chat about their experiences in wheelchair sport. I also talked to Adam and Tash about some of the work they've been doing to make the Gold Coast a more inclusive place for people with disabilities. Hi Adam and Natasha, and thank you so much for taking the time this afternoon.
Yeah, no worries. It's good to be on.
It's good to be here. Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome. So Adam and Tash, you two have been training together for a while now. Can you tell me how everything got started for you as a partnership?
Yeah, it's a good story actually. I went to a development camp at the Australian Institute of Sport when I was pretty new to racing, coming up 2 years ago now. And everybody knew I was looking for a coach because there's really not many in Queensland. And a mutual friend of ours suggested that I get hold of Adam and see if he was willing to give it a go. So it's exactly what I did. And I guess the rest is history.
Yeah, very much. I literally just, I was a wheelchair racer and for about 10 or 12 years, and I stopped in the early 2000s. Sort of always kept an interest in the sport, and I became a qualified personal trainer, and sort of always kept one hand in the fitness industry sort of thing. And then one day I just got this Facebook message off Tash, and she's like, "Hey, I'm looking for a coach," and I was like, "Awesome, let's do this thing." So that's basically the ride so far.
Awesome. And so Adam, as you mentioned, you were an athlete in the past and predominantly a coach and personal trainer now. Can you tell me a little bit about your career in sport and then some of the work that you've gone on to do in the years since?
Yeah, sure, absolutely. So I was involved in sport at a very, very early age. I was born with my disability, spina bifida. So I was involved. I think I started swimming competitively in local sort of disability competitions and things at like 7 or 8 years old. And so I was a swimmer for quite a long time. Then got sick of staring at a black line. So in the pool. So we went, then I started sort of dabbled in a bit of wheelchair basketball, and that was a lot of fun, but that was just sort of a bit of a side thing. And then one day a guy I know had an old racing chair that he was getting rid of because he'd got a new one, and somehow the idea was struck up that I'd jump in and have a go, and absolutely loved it, and never looked back basically from that point. So I started racing. I joined the local runners club. I was the only wheelchair person in a wheelchair in the runners club, but I did all their fun runs and all that, and then I was involved with sporting wheelies in Brisbane already, so I started going to their competitions and going away on their teams and that sort of thing. Yeah. Basically I decided I'd had enough about probably 2001, 2002. I think I'd sort of been toying with the idea of quitting racing for a while, and it was about then that I decided it was time.
And for you, Tash, you've had a pretty rapid rise in terms of wheelchair sport over the last couple of years. Can you tell me a little bit about that journey?
Yeah, so for me, I've got a rare disease which left me paralysed and blind pretty much overnight. So after lots of treatment and lots of relapses and everything else, I ended up being unable to get out of bed for pretty much 8 or 9 years. And I just kind of got to a point with my life and the way it was that I couldn't live like that anymore. I couldn't continue on just literally lying in bed all day, every day, watching TV and just having no goals, no dreams, no prospects for the future. And I literally sat there one day and said to my mum, I'm going to do a marathon. she kind of looked at me and laughed and was like, yeah, okay, pull the other one. How do you think you're going to do that? You can't even transfer off the bed into a wheelchair at this point. And I was like, no, I'll do it. And literally would have been 3 months later, I did my first bridge to Brisbane in my day chair, which was just 5K. And I did a lot of road races in my day chair right up to half marathon. So that was 21K. Doing that in a day chair is not fun. It's really not an ideal way to go about things. But I did that for maybe coming up maybe 18 months or so, just gradually increasing distances, and got to a point where somebody said to me, you need to get a racing chair. But it took me a really, really long time to get the funds in order to actually be able to take that up as a sport.
Yeah, okay.
And finally managed to get my race chair. Would have been 3 weeks out from the Gold Coast Marathon in 2018. And I went and did the race when I'd only had the chair for 3 weeks. So did the full 42K. I had no idea what I was doing. The chair broke down, the front tire burst, just everything you can imagine that could go wrong went wrong for me on that race. But the one thing is, I will never forget some of the lessons I learned during it. And it kind of, because I was in a race against, for me at that point, it was just supposed to be a bit of fun. I was going to do this marathon once, or, just as a bit of a hobby. And I met some of the Paralympians there, and they said to me, you really need to start thinking about taking this up seriously. They told me about the camp at the Australian Institute of Sport, and I was like, yeah, okay, I'll go along to a development camp, see what it's like. And yeah, the rest is history. I just fell in love with the sport, and I fell in love with the people that it draws into it. So I just ran with that, or pushed with that. But yeah, so from that point on, I went on to win Auckland Marathon last November, and won my first Queensland State Championships in March. And I was supposed to go to the Nationals in Sydney at the end of March, but obviously with the COVID stuff, that's been postponed for now. But yeah, I'll see what happens with all of that stuff. I'm hoping one day to represent Australia, so we'll see what happens.
It really is a meteoric rise in such a short time, and I'm really interested in terms of, from a coaching perspective, how does training work? What sort of exercises and activities are required to get you in that sort of shape to complete a wheelchair marathon?
Yeah, I mean, it's a lot of work. I'm training in total about 3 hours a day, but that includes stretching and all the preparation work, activating muscles and all that kind of stuff. And then we do a distance session out in my race chair twice a week, and we do a interval track session twice a week, and then we do.
Then Wednesday, we generally treat Wednesdays as a bit of a recovery day. It's sort of funny in the middle of the week, but it's more of a recovery day. We do a core session, and when the pools are open, we go. We swim as well.
Yeah.
So that's.
And I couldn't swim. Certainly not as a paraplegic until meeting this guy. I was absolutely petrified of water, and now you can't get me out of it. I love it. I get a real kick out of swimming.
Well, not a kick.
Yeah, not a kick. A paddle. But yeah, we do strength training. I do that 5 times a week. because I do the extra day when on the weekend. But we try and separate it so that we concentrate on certain muscle groups on certain days, because you're doing all upper body. You've got to try and isolate those muscles, because you can't do one day upper body and one day lower body like able-bodied people might do.
And the important thing, particularly for a wheelchair user like Tash or like myself, whether you're a wheelchair racer or not, looking after your shoulders and your upper body joints is absolutely imperative, because you can do things like rotator cuff injuries, and which can be really, really detrimental to somebody who has no use of their legs at all, can't walk, and solely relies on the upper body to get around. So we have a really strong focus on injury prevention and things like that in training as well.
Awesome. And obviously the gyms have been shut in Queensland then for a couple of months now. How have you been able to sort of adapt to those circumstances?
It's been tough. I mean, we have still managed to train, certainly the same number of hours, the same days per week. We've obviously had to very much adapt what we were doing. Both of us had equipment at home, so that we've kind of pulled together and used as best we can, and we've tried to maintain a cardio element from home as well. But I've definitely lost fitness, not a huge amount, but so much that I'm noticing it in the speeds I'm able to do. My endurance is about the same, but and I guess the thing is, we have had to do a lot of road sessions whilst out in my racing chair, and whilst that's great to get the distance in, you're not getting the same intensity of training, because you're always stopping at lights, you're having to be careful of traffic around you, there's always obstacles, which means your heart rate doesn't really get up for any decent amount of time. So that's had a little bit of an effect on things for me. But the great thing is we've gotten back into the gym and to the track this last week or so, and things are already starting to improve. So I think when you've got that base level there, it's not quite so hard to get back to where you were, as long as you're willing to put a few hours a week in. Yeah.
Obviously, as you mentioned before, COVID-19's forced a couple of events and different events that you were training for to be cancelled or postponed. Is there still any big competitions or anything that you're training specifically for at the minute, or has it all been put off for a couple of years now?
It's so frustrating. For me, all of my events have been cancelled at this point. Certain things they've rescheduled. Like I was supposed to, the week that everything got cancelled, I was supposed to be that we all went into lockdown. I was supposed to be doing Manchester Marathon in the UK.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah, it will. The problem is they've rescheduled for October, and if the borders don't open, I won't be able to do that either. Yeah. So we'll see. We'll see what happens. They're talking about still rescheduling the National Athletics Championships, but I don't know when that will happen. That's short distance racing. It's completely. I'm state champion, but it's not really my event. It's not what I've specifically trained for. I want to get back to marathons, but I just don't know how long that's going to be. Whilst there's not a huge number of great events in Australia to do a marathon with. So
for a wheelchair racer, it's a little bit different for a runner, but wheelchair racers there's a lot of focus on what the course is like. What the road surfaces are like and that sort of thing, and
hills
and consideration needs to be taken into, do you bother spending the money going to those events if the track or if the course is not great for a wheelie? Benefit versus no benefit at all in going and just ticking another race off sort of thing. Yeah.
So the only one that's looking like it probably will go ahead that we can get to is Auckland Marathon again, which is first week of November, if the New Zealand travel bubble goes ahead, that will be all right. But unfortunately, it is a tough course with with the chance of getting a decent time on just really makes it very, very difficult. It wouldn't be able to be used for a qualifying time for anything. However, it may be the only race I can do this year, so I will go to it regardless.
Get one in.
Yeah, exactly.
That's right. Well, fingers crossed that will all go ahead. And we sort of mentioned this sort of in your previous answer, but in terms of the opportunities then for young athletes with disability in Australia, in particular in wheelchair racing, how's the pathway in Queensland?
Yeah, it's a difficult one. I think based in Queensland specifically, it's there's not a huge amount of support for wheelchair racing. It's getting better. There's certain people that are doing great things to advocate for the sport in this area, but unfortunately our local wheelchair sports association doesn't really push wheelchair racing as a sport that matters all that much. So you go it quite alone in Queensland. If you're down in Victoria or New South Wales, it's better. Wheelchair Sports New South Wales is a fantastic organisation. They put on a lot of races and training and events and stuff. So yeah.
And they're very good with being inclusive of interstate athletes as well in Queensland and whatnot. They keep us in the loop and keep us informed as well.
They're really good. New South Wales Institute of Sport is Louise Savage, who's clearly one of Australia's best ever wheelchair racers, has a big hand in the way their program's been developed there. So they've got a great mentor and a great source of information there. So and she's been fantastic with us as well.
Absolutely.
Adam, you could probably speak to this. You mentioned your experiences as a younger person doing swimming in the variety of sports that you were involved in. How important do you think those really strong athletic pathways are for young people with disability?
Extremely important. Extremely important. I don't want to say more important than for any other child without a disability, or person without a disability. But in a lot of ways, it is. Because myself as a wheelchair user, an example, my opportunities for health and fitness and exercise aren't as, I can't just go and join a basketball team or a football team or a soccer team so the pathways that are there are really important because there's less of them for people with disabilities and we're certainly trying to change that and the future is looking bright, but absolutely, but those pathways are great. And it's all about it's taught me. I was lucky. I grew up with parents that were like, you give everything a go, and I wasn't sort of wrapped up in cotton wool at all. And they were like, you go out, and if I stacked out of my chair or whatever, so be it. Dust myself off and go again, sort of thing.
Get back up.
It's taught me resilience and it's been a massive part of my life. So very important.
I think as well and certainly something I learned with becoming involved in sport is that sense of identity and feeling like you have somebody that you're similar to and who understands you, and that's the great thing about having other wheelies and that kind of involvement. There's such a camaraderie around it, and I think because there aren't that many wheelchair users around that you tend to meet just in everyday life, it just gives you a bond with other people that you need somebody that you can talk to that understands. It's important.
And Tash, you were recently nominated as one of the Gold Coast Women of the Year. You must be tremendously proud of that achievement. And a couple of years ago, you were presenting to thousands of people during the 2018 Commonwealth Games. It just seems like it's been an absolutely huge couple of years for you.
It really has. It's so surreal. I honestly, just over 3 years ago, I couldn't move out of bed, and then here I am, not that long after, as you said, presenting at the Commonwealth Games charity gala and medal unveil in front of 1,000 Olympic athletes and VIPs. There were politicians and all sorts there. It was a crazy experience. Then I went on to do the Queen's baton relay, which was just mind-blowingly nuts. I did it up in Tambourine, and they had over 5,000 people there. It was just
wow.
It was just crazy. And then obviously coming on to this year where I got nominated for where I got to be a finalist for the Gold Coast Women of the Year. So I'm in the top 3 for the Champion of Sport category. And we find out who the winner is on the 26th of June, I believe. It's crazy. I mean, to me, I'm just a person getting on with my life and making the most of every moment and loving it. And if people see inspiration in that, then I'm very, very honoured. And I just hope that I can always do what I can to show how wonderful life can be in spite of challenges. It's a wonderful world out there. You just got to grab life by the horns and go with it.
And you're both accessing support through the National Disability Insurance Scheme. Can you talk to me a little bit about how that NDIS support helps you achieve your personal and your sporting goals?
So I guess in a lot of ways it's given independence. For me specifically, because obviously I have a visual impairment as well as the mobility issues, being able to pay for support that I just wouldn't otherwise be able to afford. Somebody that can drive me around and help me out with my day-to-day tasks, whether that be acting as my eyes when we're out and about, or just helping me with day-to-day tasks. It's made a huge difference to my life. It really, really has. I feel much more independent with the help and support of NDIS.
For me, it's I'm fortunate that I drive and all that sort of thing. But for me, NDIS has certainly made life a lot less stressful. I live with my wife and my 3-year-old son in a 2-story, 2-bedroom townhouse. So I've got a stair lift that gets me up and down stairs and that sort of thing. But the basic things that you would do as a house owner or as a property owner, cleaning the house and things like that, in that kind of environment are tenfold harder as a wheelchair user and in that kind of confined space. So I've been lucky through NDIS. I've been able to get some assistance with cleaning the house and things like that. Being a wheelchair user for nearly 38 years as well, I'm pretty, I'm a bit of a go-getter. I like to go out, and I go out camping and I go fishing and all that sort of stuff. And so my mobility equipment from time to time can take a bit of a beating. So it's good to have the funds there to just things like bearings and just general maintenance that, because I am so active, do need doing fairly often. It's been great for that as well.
That's awesome to hear. And so apart from sport, and obviously you're both incredibly passionate about sport and training and keeping fit, but you're both also very passionate about accessibility and inclusion. In terms of distance wheelchair racing in Queensland, how inclusive of an environment is it? Do all the marathons and distance races have options for the participation of people with disability, or is it only a limited few?
Yeah, so we're very, very lucky in Queensland that we have Gold Coast Marathon that runs a fantastic event for wheelchair racers. In fact, it's the best one in the country. They do it so well. It's a great course, and it's an established wheelchair race that takes off ahead of the general marathon. Outside of that, unfortunately, there's not that much inclusion when it comes to road racing. The track athletics side of things is really, really good. Any Athletics Australia event can have wheelchair racers involved. Road racing is different because they're often concerned about wheelchair racers getting caught up with the able-bodied runners, and usually the able-bodied always take precedence, which is a real shame, because I think they're missing out on a lot by not being more inclusive with what they do. That being said, it could be a lot worse, and often like the issues we've mentioned before can make road racing more difficult. If the road surfaces are bad, if there's hairpin turns and lots of things like that, there are many different considerations that you have to take into account when you're racing in a wheelchair. Being somebody that's already crashed, burned, broken my collarbone, and given myself post-traumatic amnesia for 6 months, I can definitely say that you really need to pick and choose your races.
But it's a great sport.
No, it is. But you have to do your research on the courses you decide to participate in, and that's probably my fault for being the kind of person that tends to wing bits and wing things a little bit.
No.
You haven't noticed that, Adam?
No, not at all. No, Tash is extreme as a coach. She is extremely, as her coach, she is extremely determined, and
stubborn.
And yes, stubborn's a good word. Stubborn's a good word, and as her coach, and I like to try and keep her in one piece where possible. I just have to sort of try and slow it down a little bit. Not slow her down, but
rein me in
a little bit. So only on the odd occasion.
Like once a week.
I was going to say 2 or 3 times a week, maybe. But,
That doesn't seem too bad.
Yeah.
In terms of inclusion and accessibility, then more generally, talking outside of sport, you've also been doing a fair bit of work in the community, trying to make society in general a bit more inclusive for people with disabilities. Can you tell me a little bit about that body of work?
Yeah, so Tash and I both have a huge passion for making the world a better place for people with disabilities, and so we sort of put our minds together and came up with this business idea that we've put into practice, where we basically work with businesses around accessibility and inclusion. We talk to them about specifically about working with different people with disabilities, how to get what they can do to get people with disabilities into their businesses, because it's really an untapped. No, I wouldn't say untapped, but it's a demographic that a lot of businesses aren't realising, and there's a lot of people out there with different disabilities, and with some small changes, there's a lot of business out there that could become really, really good at being accessible and inclusive. So Tash and I we've been doing some great stuff with Queensland Surf Lifesaving, and we've also been doing some consultancy work, looking for some businesses that are building accessible accommodation, things like that.
Yeah, through
disability housing solutions. Yeah. So
I'm working with Volunteering Gold Coast as well. Yeah. So yeah, we've recently been involved with helping to get the beach access. The mats, the motor mats on the beach. So the pilot program was Surfers Paradise with the Surfers Paradise Surf Lifesaving Club. So we did that in conjunction with obviously Surf Lifesaving Queensland and
volunteering Gold Coast. The Moby mats are great. They're a really good step towards having all our beaches accessible for people with disability. And the Moby mats have been around for a little while, but I think they were sort of given to the surf clubs to use, but then surf clubs were like, I don't know what to do with this. What do we? So we've been working with them and through volunteering Gold Coast as well to just put some practices in place and get a program happening with that. So they're utilised, which is great.
And obviously we've been working with the CC Big group. I can never remember what that stands for. Community something.
The Community Capacity Building Inclusion Group.
Nice.
I know the letters, but it takes me about 10 minutes to remember what each one stands for. But so obviously we've been working with those guys to try and implement as many of our ideas as possible, I guess, to make the Gold Coast a fantastic place for people with disabilities to live.
Yeah, there's a phenomenal group of people from a massive demographic in that group, and we're really lucky to be involved with that. And
some great minds in that. It really is.
We'll need a lot of time to get all the ideas, because everyone just comes to the group with new ideas all the time, and there's a lot of thought that goes into it. So it's really great.
Well, it's awesome to see people having so much passion in terms of improving their own community and the place they live, and something like in terms of the Moby mats. You're in the Gold Coast. The beach is such a big part of that culture, and it's so awesome that people can, everyone can go and enjoy that beautiful natural resource that's there on the Gold Coast. So it's really awesome work.
Yeah, I as I say, I've always been a wheelchair user, and I've got a 3-year-old son, and you can't live on the Gold Coast and not go to the beach. Like that's just you can't do that, And my biggest thing for Fletcher, my son, was I want to take him to the beach. That's what kids on the Gold Coast do. So, the introduction of the Moby mat and the program we've been lucky enough to be involved within means that, I can do that now. I can take him down to the beach myself. And him and I can go down the beach together and have some fun. And it's really great.
That's all I have to ask you guys today, but thank you so much for taking the time to have a chat with me.
No worries.
No, it's been great. Thank you.
Wonderful.
Thank you once again for tuning in to Choice and Control, a Carers Queensland podcast. For more information about Carers Queensland, the National Disability Insurance Scheme, or the local area coordination program, please connect with us online at carersqueensland.com.au. Or you can catch up with us on Facebook at facebook.com/Carers Queensland NDIS. We hope this podcast can become a place for people with disability to share their experiences and their stories. So if you have a story that you think we should know about, please contact us via the Carers Queensland Inquiries line at 1300 999 636 or via email at cq.inquiries@ndis.gov.au. Until next time, thanks for listening.